The reason I am smiling is that I had just completed 70% of this lecture uh, and realized I'd forgotten to turn the camera on. And I'm still smiling because then I pushed the button and got about 3 minutes in the lecture and I realized that the camera feature was working, not the video feature. Duh. We're coming to the end of this class. There are just a couple more weeks, and I want you to know it's been a pleasure to work with you. Uh, I want to thank each of you for your prayers last week as I traveled to Indiana to officiate at the funeral celebration for my Aunt Maxine, my father's remaining sibling. It was a great blessing, and someday I'll have to tell you some of the stories. I'm also thankful that God blessed Indiana while I was there with good weather, because right after I passed out of Indiana on Tuesday into Ohio, by the next morning, northern Indiana and Ohio were not nice places to be because of the weather. So you can blame me for leaving the bad weather or holding off the bad weather. We are now into week 10. And before starting today, I want to say something about the next 2 weeks which follow. When I designed this class, I tried to identify a primary textbook that would give you a good overview of what it meant to provide leadership to a church or ministry. And for the last couple of classes, Welch does the best of what I've been able to find. But I still found it deficient in a couple of purposes. One, although the course description does not specifically talk about small church administration, I felt it was appropriate to have a session on that because most of us and most of you will minister much of your career in what are defined as smaller membership churches. And then secondly, the whole idea of ministry in the digital age. This is such a evolving and rapidly changing area that most standard textbooks give you just very little continuing help in that. And so, again, I decided we needed that lecture because it's always a part of it, but I needed to provide you a resource. But I need to tell you that I will review the key points of each book in my lectures, so you are not required to purchase the books, but you may want to own them anyway. I also did that, frankly, to save you a little money. And finally, to cut down on the reading you need to engage in these last 2 or 3 weeks, because you'll notice the reading assignments have gotten shorter and shorter because I know that you're in the major part of your writing. Now, the readings of last week and this week come from Anderson and Fox, which I have come to regard as the best readable text on this subject, a text that can be used to train others in your church. And as I said, most weeks I try to provide additional things to the reading, but much of what I share this week is so very closely related to them that it may sound a little redundant. But let's pray. Precious God, as we come this morning, this day, to talk about training and supporting of volunteers in the church, I pray that you will give us wisdom and insight, and I pray that those persons who are under our care will grow in that way. In Jesus' name, amen. Excuse me. Volunteers are an essential, if not perhaps the most essential human resource of the church. Because next to recruiting volunteers without a clear and appropriate strategy in place, the greatest crime of many churches is the failure to provide adequate training and systematic support for your volunteers. Excuse me. Hopefully, we have recruited our volunteers by helping them identify their gifts and passions, as well as giving them a good job description. But there's great value as well in fostering a sense of calling to service, perhaps a specific calling to the area of ministry in which they are providing service in. Because here's the simple truth that I use in leading particularly with volunteers. When a person is working from a sense of calling from God, the Spirit provides the motivation to give the very best to God and to His church. And the understanding that they can accomplish this because God is working in and through them, Philippians 4:13. And also the perspective that fruitfulness is in the hands of God. They do their very best, but it's up to God for the results. We were just interrupted by the phone. It's Monday morning. The church is very busy, and I hope it's not too distracting. My administrative assistant is fielding the calls, but here we are. Let me suggest that our support of volunteers therefore starts with teaching that as the priesthood of all believers, we all, not just the professional staff, have a calling from the Lord. Now, what is involved in quality training? I'm going to share a couple of perspectives with you. One is from Tina Stewart, who is a ministry consultant and a speaker with Ministry in Motion in Benicia, California. And when she talks about providing opportunities and training, one of the first things that she says is give them permission to try and to fail. People are often reluctant to volunteer because they're afraid that either they won't know how to do the job or that they might fail completely in doing it. One of the best ways to dispel their fears is to allow them to try short-term volunteer opportunities because this helps them gain confidence. Maybe before you ask them to take on a Bible study, you might invite them to lead 1 week under your care. There are other things that you can do. Instead of turning over the major maintenance issues of the church to them, perhaps just having them work on a project. Now, most people find that when they actually do step into a ministry position, it's not as scary as they had imagined, and most stick with it once they've decided to try it. We also need to provide coaching and training because potential volunteers want the reassurance that they won't be abandoned when they get involved. Don't put someone into a new position, hand him or her a book, and close the door. Do a talk through and a walk through, and first talk to them about what is expected and how the job can be done, and then, if possible, have them observe someone doing the job so they can see how it currently is being managed, even though you're encouraging them to do it in a way that's appropriate to them. And then follow up periodically to see how they are doing. Volunteer leadership can be a very lonely place, or volunteer ministry, if you think nobody's paying any attention. Glenn Damon, who we used last week as a resource from the Small Church Leadership, has some thoughts also I think are useful in addition to Anderson and Fox. Under training volunteers, he would say that the second key ingredient to working with volunteers is training that is offered to them. And he reminds us that Paul writes that the task of leadership is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, Ephesians 4:12, and this implies training them for service. Yet the small church itself often lacks the resources to train people. Seminars are often too far away, too costly to attend, and particularly if your setting is rural, they do not correspond with that schedule. Therefore, the church needs to be carefully considering how to equip and to train people for ministry, because training is the process of actually helping people become more and more knowledgeable and effective in the ministries that they serve. So training begins with careful and honest evaluation of the ministries in order to identify those training needs. Don't just say, we need this job done. What does it involve? Damon says there are at least 3 types of training. One is what we call increasing skills, and perhaps that's the most common type of training. It is geared to this particular area that they're going to serve in to develop their skills to be more effective. An example of this kind of training would be a training session given to any Sunday school teacher on how to share the gospel with a young child. Every ministry within church should occasionally have training sessions designed to help people become more skilled in performing their ministry. Because even those who have been in the job for a while need a refresher, if not for no other reason than to increase their passion. But we encourage pastors, the professionals, to engage in continuing education because we know that the demands of ministry are changing and the context of ministry is changing. And the fact of the matter is, ideas that worked when we began don't always work now. Why not give the same benefit to a volunteer? And then Damon says there's cross-training. Cross-training is the training designed to help people perform a variety of tasks, especially to help them develop and exercise their spiritual gifts in a variety of ways. You know, the smaller church relies heavily upon people who are willing to do a number of different tasks. And this is perhaps most critical for a smaller church because you don't have the benefit of specializing quite like you would in a larger setting. For example, training a Sunday school teacher how to lead a Bible study will not only make them more effective as a teacher, but will also open up new ministries for them and the church. And then there's training in basic skills. Basic skills are foundational regardless of the ministry a person is involved in. Skills in communication, skills in conflict management, problem solving, strategic planning. These should be taught. I just completed a workshop Saturday called How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. And the people participating in that class were not simply teachers, but persons who, in their role of leadership, wanted to be able to understand the Word in depth. And I know that what they learned will help them in their roles as well. We also should remember that skills can be taught by church-wide seminars and training sessions, like I described just a moment ago, because in doing so, people will not only become more effective in their particular area of ministry, but the whole church will be better equipped to work together as a community. Think about training as a time to build community, to increase the shared vision. Now, there are 3 rules of training, according to him. One is that people do not immediately possess all the necessary skills to be effective. Spiritual gifts, while divinely bestowed, need to be cultivated and developed. The leader needs to help people who are gifted in a particular area further develop the necessary skills to perform the task well. Secondly, people need structured training because very few people have time, energy, and self-motivation to train themselves in particular areas of ministry. Very few people. There needs to be a structured program that encourages them in learning and in ministry development. And then third, train people according to their needs and interests because people learn most when they see the relevance of the training. And for example, the most effective time to instruct people on issues of ministry is when they are facing the issues that are being addressed by the training. The time to instruct on classroom discussion, the time to instruct on classroom discipline is when the area of concern expressed by the Sunday school teachers is that they have discipline problems. Then there are training methods. There are several. One is utilizing available resources, and you can go into any Christian bookstore or you can turn on your email and there are multiple resources available to you. One of the reasons I did not provide you a resource is because these things are always being developed, they're always being improved upon, they're fresh, and I know that you can find those resources. There are many regional seminars and conferences offered a number of different issues ranging from Christian education to leadership to financial management. And my own conference, Eastern Regional Conference, has a number of those. By sending even one individual who then reports what he or she has learned is a way that the whole church can benefit. But I'm going to tell you, when you have those kind of conferences, send at least a couple because they can kind of cross-pollinate. Another means of training is to contact the various ministries or parachurch organizations who can come to the church for training. For example, Child Evangelism Fellowship can offer some excellent training for children's ministries. Another resource available are other pastors and lay leaders who can offer training in special areas of ministry. We're sometimes reluctant to bring that person into the church because we're afraid that people will become attracted to them and they'll go to that church, or they'll start comparing you with them. No, they have their areas of gifts and skills. Invite them to come and share what they know, their expertise. It is, after all, a kingdom issue. And don't be afraid to use resources. This is me adding. Don't be afraid to use resources that come outside the church and even outside the kingdom, so to speak. We have a number of ministries at the church I now serve that intersect with people who are seniors or who have seniors issues like dementia, and we recently brought people in from the senior centers and the autism people to just do a general training on how you handle individuals in your families or in your setting who have these issues, including how to counsel them to get aid. But those people who came to that training now have some understanding that can be used in a variety of ministries. And now there's apprenticeship programs. You attach them to somebody who's doing the job. Let them learn from it. The benefit of that is the person they're attached to learns some fresh ideas from the novice, and the novice gains from experience. The third is group discussions. Having your particular teachers gather together to discuss issues, concerns, or problems and ideas is a way that the individual can benefit from the collective knowledge of the whole. And group discussions are invaluable for dealing with the current problems that might arise. Then there's in-house training. The leader can foster learning by assigning training topics to certain individuals. Instead of you doing all the training, find someone who you think could understand and communicate and give them the opportunity. That's a form of training. After the individual has researched the issue, he or she can then conduct a mini seminar covering the material they've learned And likewise, the pastor or leader can research a topic in order to instruct the rest of the group or the congregation on the issue. And number 5, encourage reading. People do read. As a means of fostering personal growth, the leader should encourage reading. Assign a book relating to a relevant issue. After the group has had the opportunity to read the book, meet together and discuss the content and material of the book. Now, how do we support our volunteers? Just to give this video some focus, I'm going to stop and start another one for this last part.